I never thought I would witness the Supreme Allied Commander refuse to enter a subordinate's headquarters. My name is Colonel Chester Hansen, and in March 1945, I was a 32-year-old aide-de-camp to General Omar Bradley, serving at 12th Army Group Headquarters in Germany as Allied forces pushed toward final victory. I'd been with Bradley since North Africa in 1943, witnessing the evolution of Allied command relationships, the complex personalities of senior commanders, and the political maneuvering that often influenced military decisions as much as tactical considerations. By March 1945, the war in Europe was clearly entering its final phase, but tensions between American and British commanders had reached unprecedented levels. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's 21st Army Group was preparing to cross the Rhine River in what Montgomery envisioned as the decisive operation of the war, a massive set-piece assault that would demonstrate British military prowess and position Montgomery as the architect of Germany's defeat. But on March 25, 1945, when General Dwight Eisenhower drove to Montgomery's elaborate headquarters near Wesel to observe the Rhine crossing operations, something unprecedented happened. Eisenhower took one look at Montgomery's headquarters complex, turned to his staff, and flatly refused to enter, delivering a statement about command relationships, military professionalism, and Allied cooperation that revealed just how damaged the relationship between the Supreme Commander and his most prominent subordinate had become. The morning of March 25th started with our convoy departing Bradley's headquarters near Namur for the drive to Montgomery's field headquarters on the western bank of the Rhine. Eisenhower had flown in from his own headquarters to observe Montgomery's crossing operation, which had begun the previous evening with massive artillery bombardment and airborne assaults. The Supreme Commander was traveling with his usual small staff, Major General Harold Pinky Bull, his operations officer, Air Marshal Arthur Tedder, his deputy, and several aides, including myself, present because Bradley had been invited to accompany Eisenhower for the visit. The drive took about 2 hours through countryside, still showing the scars of recent fighting. Destroyed vehicles lined the roads, towns showed evidence of artillery damage, and military traffic was heavy with supplies and reinforcements moving toward the Rhine. Bradley rode in the staff car with Eisenhower, and I could hear fragments of their conversation from my position in the following vehicle. Bradley's voice carried his characteristic Midwestern flatness. "Ike, I need to warn you that Monty's put on quite a show. He's been positioning this Rhine crossing as the decisive operation of the war, claiming it will demonstrate superior British planning and execution compared to American operations. The headquarters he's set up is elaborate, even by his standards." Eisenhower's response was too quiet for me to hear clearly, but his body language suggested resignation rather than surprise. The relationship between Eisenhower and Montgomery had been deteriorating throughout the campaign, marked by disagreements about strategy, command arrangements, and credit for Allied successes. Montgomery's tendency to criticize American operations while promoting British achievements had created resentment among American commanders, and Eisenhower's efforts to maintain Allied unity were becoming increasingly difficult. As we approached Montgomery's headquarters complex, the scale and elaboration became immediately apparent. Montgomery had established his command post in a series of large tents and requisitioned buildings arranged in precise military order. British military police directed traffic with parade ground precision. Flags flew from multiple poles, including an oversized British flag that dominated the complex. Staff officers moved about in spotless uniforms despite the muddy conditions. The entire setup projected British military efficiency and organizational superiority in ways that seemed calculated to impress visitors. But what caught everyone's attention was the caravan. Montgomery's personal headquarters was housed in a collection of specially designed trailers and mobile units that formed an elaborate command complex. These weren't simple field headquarters tents or requisitioned buildings. They were custom-designed mobile offices with mahogany paneling, proper furniture, communications equipment, map rooms, and all the amenities of a permanent headquarters, transported on multiple large vehicles and set up with precision whenever Montgomery moved his command post. Our convoy stopped at the headquarters entrance, where a British officer waited to receive the Supreme Commander. Eisenhower got out of his vehicle, as did Bradley and the rest of us. The British officer saluted crisply and began what was clearly a prepared speech. "Supreme Commander Field Marshal Montgomery welcomes you to 21st Army Group Headquarters. The Field Marshal is prepared to brief you on current operations across the Rhine and to show you the command facilities that have been established to direct what will be the decisive assault that breaks German resistance and ends the war in Europe. If you'll follow me, sir, I'll escort you to the Field Marshal's personal command caravan where the briefing has been prepared. Eisenhower stood there for a long moment, looking at the elaborate headquarters complex, the oversized British flag, the spotless uniforms, and the command caravans that represented everything Montgomery's command style embodied. Then he turned to Bradley and his staff, and what he said revealed the depth of his frustration with Montgomery's approach to coalition command. "Gentlemen, I'm not going in there," Eisenhower said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute finality. "I will not participate in a staged demonstration designed to promote British superiority over American operations. I will not sit through a briefing in Montgomery's elaborate headquarters while American soldiers are fighting and dying with minimal fanfare and none of the resources that have been devoted to this theatrical production. And I will not endorse Montgomery's narrative that this Rhine crossing is somehow more significant or better executed than the crossings American forces have already accomplished." The British officer looked stunned. Bradley's expression remained neutral, but I could see a slight smile at the corners of his mouth. The rest of us tried to maintain professional composure while witnessing the Supreme Allied Commander refuse to enter a subordinate's headquarters. "Sir, Field Marshal Montgomery is expecting you," the British officer said, clearly unsure how to handle this unprecedented situation. "He has prepared an extensive briefing on the operation." "Then the Field Marshal can come out here and brief me in the open air," Eisenhower replied. "I don't need mahogany paneling and custom furniture to understand a military operation. Tell Montgomery I'm here to observe the Rhine crossing, not to be impressed by his headquarters arrangements." The British officer disappeared to relay this message to Montgomery. Bradley moved closer to Eisenhower, and I was near enough to hear their quiet conversation. "Ike, this is going to create a diplomatic incident," Bradley said, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly concerned about that prospect. "Monty's going to see this as a deliberate insult." "It is a deliberate statement," Eisenhower replied. "Brad, I'm tired of Montgomery's constant self-promotion at the expense of American forces. I'm tired of his elaborate headquarters and his careful stage management of every operation to maximize British credit. I'm tired of fighting this war against the Germans while also fighting a political war against my own subordinate about who gets credit for victory. Montgomery needs to understand that I'm the Supreme Commander, not his public relations manager." "What specifically set you off?" Bradley asked. "You've tolerated his behavior for years." Eisenhower gestured toward the headquarters complex. "Look at this. Montgomery has devoted enormous resources to creating a mobile palace that projects British superiority. Meanwhile, your headquarters is operating out of requisitioned buildings with minimal amenities. Patton's Third Army has been fighting with inadequate supplies, while Montgomery's 21st Army Group has received priority for everything from ammunition to fuel to bridge-building equipment for this Rhine crossing. And now Montgomery expects me to come to his elaborate headquarters and participate in a briefing designed to present this operation as demonstrating British military excellence compared to supposedly inferior American operations. The American Rhine crossings at Remagen and elsewhere weren't given this level of support," Bradley observed. "Exactly," Eisenhower said. "When Hodges's First Army captured the Remagen Bridge and established a bridgehead across the Rhine, they did it with what they had on hand, without massive preliminary bombardment, without priority for supplies, without elaborate planning. It was opportunistic, aggressive, and successful. When Patton's Third Army crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim, they did it with minimal casualties and no fanfare, just good soldiering and tactical skill. But Montgomery's crossing requires months of preparation, massive resource allocation, elaborate planning, and now this theatrical headquarters setup to properly showcase British military prowess. I'm done enabling that narrative." The British officer returned with Montgomery himself, who approached with his characteristic confidence. Montgomery was 57 years old, wearing his trademark beret and custom-tailored uniform, projecting the image of military competence and British steadfastness that had made him a public hero. His expression suggested puzzlement rather than offense at Eisenhower's refusal to enter his headquarters. "Supreme Commander, I understand there's some confusion about the briefing arrangements," Montgomery said in that clipped upper-class British accent that Americans found simultaneously impressive and irritating. "I've prepared a comprehensive presentation on Operation Plunder and the airborne assault. I think you'll find it demonstrates the value of careful planning and adequate preparation for major operations. I'm sure your presentation is excellent, Monty, Eisenhower replied, his tone carefully controlled. But I don't need to see it in your command caravan. If you want to brief me, we can do it right here in the open, or you can provide a written summary. I'm here to observe the actual crossing operation, not to participate in headquarters theater. Montgomery's expression tightened. Supreme Commander, I must say this is highly irregular. It's customary for senior commanders to receive briefings at established headquarters facilities where proper maps and communications equipment are available. It's also customary for senior commanders to maintain appropriate relationships with their superiors, Eisenhower said, his voice taking on an edge. Monty, I'm going to be direct with you because this situation has gone on long enough. Your constant self-promotion, your efforts to position British operations as superior to American ones, your criticism of American commanders and operations while demanding preferential treatment for 21st Army Group, these things are damaging Allied unity and making my job as Supreme Commander increasingly difficult. Montgomery started to respond, but Eisenhower continued. I've tolerated your behavior because you're a capable commander, and because maintaining Allied cohesion is more important than my personal frustration. But I will not walk into your elaborate headquarters and participate in what amounts to a staged demonstration designed to promote the narrative that British forces are carrying American forces to victory. That narrative is false. It's offensive to the American soldiers who've done the bulk of the fighting and dying in this campaign, and I won't endorse it even implicitly by playing along with your theatrical productions. The silence that followed was profound. British and American staff officers stood frozen, witnessing a confrontation between the Supreme Allied Commander and his most prominent subordinate that should never have occurred in front of so many witnesses. Bradley maintained his neutral expression, but I could see satisfaction in his eyes at finally hearing someone confront Montgomery's behavior directly. Montgomery recovered his composure with characteristic British stiff upper lip. Supreme Commander, if I've given offense, it was certainly not intentional. My headquarters arrangements are simply a matter of proper military organization and efficient command and control. The resources allocated to 21st Army Group's Rhine crossing reflect the operation's strategic importance, not any preferential treatment. Monty, every operation is strategically important, Eisenhower replied. The difference is that American operations have generally been conducted with whatever resources were immediately available, while British operations have consistently received priority support and then been presented as models of superior planning compared to supposedly hasty American efforts. That pattern creates resentment, damages Allied cooperation, and distorts the historical record of this campaign. Are you suggesting that American forces have been treated unfairly in resource allocation? Montgomery asked, his tone suggesting this was an absurd notion. I'm stating as fact that American forces have accomplished as much or more with significantly fewer resources than have been devoted to high-profile British operations. Eisenhower said, the Remagen Bridge seizure, Third Army's Rhine crossing at Oppenheim, the entire drive across France after Normandy, these were accomplished by American forces without the level of support or recognition that British operations routinely receive. And I'm tired of the implied narrative that this disparity exists because American forces require less support due to inferior capabilities, rather than because British forces demand and receive preferential treatment. Bradley spoke up, his voice calm but firm. Monty, I think what Ike's trying to say is that the optics of your headquarters setup and the way this Rhine crossing has been presented are problematic. While you're conducting a set-piece assault with months of preparation and overwhelming support, American forces have been conducting similar operations with a fraction of the resources and none of the fanfare. That creates perception problems that affect Allied cooperation. Montgomery looked between Eisenhower and Bradley, clearly recognizing that he was facing a united front of American commanders who were no longer willing to tolerate his approach to coalition warfare. I see. And what would you have me do differently, Supreme Commander? I'd have you operate your headquarters like other Army Group commanders do, Eisenhower said. I'd have you stop treating every operation as an opportunity to demonstrate British superiority. I'd have you give credit to American forces when appropriate, rather than consistently emphasizing British achievements while minimizing American contributions. And I'd have you understand that you're a subordinate commander in an Allied force structure, not the senior British representative in a competition with American forces for historical recognition. Those are rather pointed criticisms, Montgomery said stiffly. They're observations based on 2 years of watching you operate, Eisenhower replied. Monty, you're a capable commander. Your planning is meticulous, your operations are generally well executed, and your troops fight effectively. But your constant need to position yourself and British forces as superior to American forces is damaging the coalition and making it increasingly difficult for me to maintain the Allied unity that's essential for finishing this war. That needs to stop. Montgomery was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Very well, Supreme Commander. Perhaps we should postpone this briefing to another time when arrangements more suitable to your preferences can be made. In the meantime, I'll continue executing Operation Plunder according to plan." "You do that," Eisenhower said. "And Monty, when the operation is complete, the official communiqué will recognize it as a successful Allied operation, not specifically as a British triumph demonstrating superior capabilities. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, Supreme Commander," Montgomery replied, his tone suggesting anything but agreement. He saluted crisply and withdrew to his headquarters complex. After Montgomery departed, Eisenhower turned to his staff. "Gentlemen, what you just witnessed stays within this group. I don't want this incident becoming fodder for press speculation or political controversy, but I want everyone to understand my reasoning for what I did." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "Coalition warfare requires maintaining unity among allies who have different national interests, different military cultures, and different commanders with different personalities. As Supreme Commander, I've spent 2 years managing those differences, mediating disputes and preventing disagreements from disrupting operations. I've tolerated behavior from Montgomery that I wouldn't accept from any American commander because maintaining British participation and cooperation was more important than my personal frustration. But there are limits," Eisenhower continued. "When a subordinate's behavior threatens the cohesion of the coalition, when his constant self-promotion creates resentment that undermines cooperation, when he consistently positions operations in ways that distort the historical record and minimize the contributions of other Allied forces, those behaviors need to be confronted. That's what I did today. Not because I personally dislike Montgomery, though frankly his personality makes that difficult to avoid, but because his approach to coalition command was reaching a point where it was causing more damage than his operational capabilities were worth." Bradley nodded in agreement. "Ike's right. Montgomery's constant need to present British operations as superior to American ones was creating increasing tension among American commanders. Patton's been openly contemptuous of Montgomery for months. Hodges resents the preferential treatment 21st Army Group receives. Simpson's 9th Army was placed under Montgomery's command during the Bulge, and the experience created lasting friction. Something needed to change. "Will this incident change Montgomery's behavior?" asked General Bull. "Probably not fundamentally," Eisenhower replied. "Montgomery's ego and his need to position himself as the great British commander of the war are too deeply ingrained to change at this stage. But he now understands that there are consequences for his behavior, that I won't indefinitely tolerate his self-promotion at the expense of Allied unity, and that his elaborate headquarters setups and careful stage management of operations are being seen for what they are, theatrical productions designed to maximize British recognition rather than genuine operational necessities." We spent several hours observing the Rhine crossing operations from various vantage points, though not from Montgomery's headquarters. The operation was indeed well executed, with massive artillery support, carefully planned assault waves, and effective coordination between ground and airborne forces. But as we watched, I couldn't help comparing it to the American crossings that had occurred with much less fanfare and far fewer resources. On the drive back to Bradley's headquarters, Eisenhower reflected on the broader implications of the incident. "Gentlemen, what happened today illustrates one of the fundamental challenges of coalition warfare: national pride, ego, competition for historical recognition. These human factors can be as challenging as actual military operations. Managing those factors requires constant diplomatic effort, frequent compromise, and occasional confrontation when behavior becomes too problematic to ignore." "Do you think Churchill will hear about this?" Bradley asked. "Undoubtedly," Eisenhower replied. "Montgomery will almost certainly report that I insulted him by refusing to enter his headquarters. Churchill will probably contact me expressing concern about Anglo-American relations. I'll explain my reasoning. Churchill will understand even if he doesn't publicly acknowledge it, and will move forward. That's how these things work at this level. Was it worth the diplomatic cost? I asked, perhaps overstepping my position, but genuinely curious about Eisenhower's calculation. Eisenhower considered the question seriously. Chester, the diplomatic cost of tolerating Montgomery's behavior indefinitely would have been higher than the cost of confronting it. American commanders and soldiers needed to see that I recognized the disparity in how British and American operations were being treated and presented. They needed to know that I wasn't simply enabling Montgomery's self-promotion for the sake of maintaining superficial Allied unity. The incident today sent a message to every commander in the theater that national pride and ego cannot be allowed to override the requirements of coalition warfare. That message was worth the temporary diplomatic discomfort. The incident did indeed create diplomatic complications, though less severe than some feared. Churchill did contact Eisenhower expressing concern, but the Prime Minister understood the underlying issues and worked to smooth over the friction. Montgomery submitted a formal complaint about being treated disrespectfully, which Eisenhower addressed in a carefully worded response that acknowledged Montgomery's operational capabilities, while firmly restating expectations for proper command relationships. More significantly, the incident marked a shift in how Montgomery operated for the remaining weeks of the war. His headquarters remained elaborate by American standards, but the overt self-promotion was toned down. Official communiques about operations began giving more credit to Allied cooperation, rather than specifically highlighting British achievements. The pattern of British operations receiving preferential resources continued, but became less pronounced as the war moved into its final phase. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. In the final accounting, American forces had liberated most of France, conducted the majority of the fighting in Germany, and absorbed the bulk of the casualties in the Western theater. British forces had made important contributions, particularly in North Africa, Italy, and northern Germany, but the scale of American involvement dwarfed British efforts. Yet the narrative Montgomery had worked so hard to construct, positioning British forces as the senior partner in the alliance, demonstrating superior military capabilities, persisted in some British accounts of the war. I remained with Bradley through the occupation period and eventually returned to the United States in 1946. I wrote a detailed account of my experiences as Bradley's aide, including the incident at Montgomery's headquarters, though that account wasn't published until decades later. The story became known among military historians as an example of the tensions inherent in coalition warfare and the challenges of managing relationships among Allied commanders with competing national interests and personal ambitions. Eisenhower went on to become Army Chief of Staff, President of Columbia University, NATO Supreme Commander, and ultimately President of the United States. Throughout his later career, he maintained the position that coalition warfare required subordinating national pride and personal ego to the broader objective of Allied cooperation. The incident with Montgomery was cited in his memoirs as an example of when confrontation became necessary to maintain the integrity of the coalition command structure. Montgomery continued his military career, eventually becoming Chief of the Imperial General Staff and a Viscount. His memoirs and public statements consistently emphasized British contributions to Allied victory while minimizing American roles, perpetuating the narrative that Eisenhower had refused to endorse at Montgomery's headquarters that March day in 1945. The two men maintained professional but distant relations for the rest of their lives, never fully reconciling their different views on coalition command and appropriate credit for victory. I'm 87 years old now, one of the last surviving members of Bradley's wartime staff. When military historians ask me about Eisenhower and Montgomery, I always tell them about that March morning when the Supreme Commander refused to enter his subordinates' elaborate headquarters. The incident revealed fundamental truths about coalition warfare, that national pride can be as challenging as enemy action, that managing Allied relationships requires constant diplomatic effort and occasional confrontation, and that the optics of command arrangements matter as much as operational effectiveness. What Eisenhower told his staff that day wasn't just about Montgomery's headquarters or the Rhine crossing. It was about the limits of tolerance for behavior that undermined Allied unity, the importance of recognizing contributions from all coalition partners fairly, and the responsibility of supreme command to confront subordinates when their actions threatened the cohesion of the alliance. Those lessons remained relevant throughout the Cold War and continue to apply to modern coalition operations, where forces from different nations must work together despite competing interests and different military cultures. My name is Chester Hansen, and I was 32 years old when I watched Dwight Eisenhower refuse to enter Bernard Montgomery's field headquarters and deliver a statement about coalition command that revealed how close the Allied partnership had come to fracturing over ego and national pride. That experience taught me that successful coalition warfare requires more than military skill and strategic planning. It requires constant management of the human factors that can divide allies as effectively as enemy action, and occasional willingness to confront behavior that threatens unity even when that confrontation creates temporary diplomatic discomfort. Eisenhower understood this, and his refusal to participate in Montgomery's theatrical presentation that day was an assertion of supreme command authority that ultimately strengthened rather than weakened the Allied coalition.